Good afternoon and welcome to your Board of County Commissioners Solid Waste Budget Workshop. Mr. Merrill, good to see you again.
Yes, hello again. Yeah, so this is the budget discussion for solid waste, but it's also the prelude to us bringing back assessment increases for next year. So what we'll do is give you an overview of the system and then identify some of the challenges we have coming down the road here. So no decisions today, but just more information and then getting feedback on what direction you'd like us to go. So with that, we have Kim Byer.
Before Kim gets started, I didn't get a note. Come on. I didn't get a note, but Commissioner Hagan will not be with us this afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Kim Byer, Solid Waste Division Director, and we're going to talk some trash today. So today I'm going to step you through the solid waste budget and I'll give you a brief overview of the solid waste system itself. The solid waste system overview will include the collection, disposal, recycling, the budget overview, both the revenue and the expenses, and the rates, both the collection and disposal rates, in addition to challenges and opportunities for innovation. Our vision is to provide for long-term, sustainable, financially responsible, integrated solid waste management. That includes the protection of the public health and safety of the environment, in addition to environmental stewardship to our residents and our stakeholders. We also want to ensure system capacity is available for long-term growth. And we also seek out and evaluate and implement innovative methods to improve collection and materials management and customer service. Our vision recognizes the waste hierarchy as a planning tool, with reduction being the most favorable method and landfilling being the least favorable. There are two major components of the solid waste system, and we'll speak to those separately, collections and disposal separately, that is. Collection includes our three franchise collectors, which are Republic, Waste Connections, and Waste Management. We also have two facilities for transfer facilities that are county operated, one in the North County and one in the South County. In addition, we have 5 community collection centers. That's where our residents can bring in those bulk items that does not fit in their carts, and they can also bring in paint and electronics. On the disposal side, we have our main disposal facility, which is a resource recovery facility operated by Covanta, Southeast Landfill, which is operated by Waste Management, and 3 yard waste processing sites that's operated by a company called Rain or Shine. In addition, we have 3 household hazardous waste facilities located throughout the county. We'll start on the collection side. How collection works. 3 trucks go by each residential unit during the week. That's about a potential of about over 1 million potential collections a week. Each resident is provided with a recycling cart and a garbage cart, and the resident themselves provides the yard waste cart. There's about 290 households in the solid waste system now for collections. That's in unincorporated and in New Tampa. And we're seeing about a growth rate of about 1.5% annually. And we have what we call a 2-1-1 system. It's automated. It's twice a week garbage, once a week recycling, and once a week yard waste. And again, that's potentially over 1 million collections weekly. We also have single stream recycling. That's where all the recycling goes into one cart, all plastic, paper, cardboard, everything into that blue recycling cart. We talked about we had the 3 franchise service providers, which we call franchise collectors, in 5 zones. That is a 7-year contract with an optional 3-year renewal. The original term expires in 2020. In order to be eligible for that renewal, their frontline fleet vehicles must be comprised of alternative fuel vehicles. Also, by being awarded a franchise, the franchise collectors can contract separately for commercial collection service. Moving into disposal, how disposal works. That garbage truck or the commercial truck that goes through the different neighborhoods has 3 locations it can go to in Hillsborough County. It can go to one of our transfer facilities. It can go to the landfill directly or to resource recovery. On the recycling end, we have a recycling processor, which is Waste Connections. They have a transfer station in the county, so that recycling truck would go to a transfer station where it be transferred to the recycling processing facility in St. Petersburg. And the yard waste trucks have 3 locations they can go to. We have 3 yard waste locations, one in South County, one in the North County, and one at our Falkenberg Resource Recovery Facility. This map just depicts the 5 collection zones in addition to the locations of our various facilities. The Falkenberg Resource Recovery Facility is our largest and main disposal facility. It processes about 545 to 565,000 tons annually. And basically, what happens is that the waste from commercial and residential sectors goes into this facility. It's incinerated, the metals are extracted, and energy is produced. Through that process, about 20% comes back as ash, and that's diverted to the Southeast landfill. That energy, about 94% of that's sold to Seminole Electric. That's enough to power about 26,000 homes annually. And then to get another 6% is actually provides power to our local county facilities, our public utilities facilities. That facility is at capacity currently, and any additional waste is diverted to the landfill. We are also evaluating some solar rooftop options here at this facility. This slide just shows the locations of the energy grid. This is our resource recovery facility. Power is provided, we self-contained power, and it also is through the grid, goes through to our Brandon Support Operations Center, which is located on Falkenberg, in addition to the Woodbury Pump Station and the Falkenberg Wastewater Treatment Facility, and then the line goes east to the central Hillsborough Water Facility. And as you can see, there's several other county facilities that surround that grid. Our Southeast landfill is our second disposal facility that's located in Lithia. It's about 3,300 acres. It receives, it has about 15.5 years of capacity remaining on that site, and it is operated by Waste Management, owned by Hillsborough County. Other solid waste facilities, we have 3 household hazardous waste facilities. Those are open on Saturdays, rotating throughout the county. 3 yard waste facilities that not only the franchise collectors can dispose of yard waste, but our residents can also visit, and 5 community collection centers throughout the county. Those facilities are open 6 days a week from 7:30 to 5 p.m. An overview of how the tons are processed through the system. The total tons processed in 2018 were a little over 1 million tons. The majority of those tons went into the resource recovery facility at about 534,000 tons. And most of that was what we call municipal solid waste from commercial and residential sources. About 82% of what goes into that facility is compostable or recyclable. The remaining tons generated goes to the landfill because, as we stated earlier, resource recovery is at capacity. Of the 331,000 tons, over 145,000 of those tons could have been processed at the resource recovery facility had capacity been available. 91% of that was ash from the resource recovery facility, and the remaining tons were construction and demolition debris, things that could not be burned at the resource recovery facility. Moving to the recycling and yard waste, we recycled about 87,000 tons in 2018. Of that, 61,000 of those were from the curbside program, and the remaining were metals from a resource recovery facility and from our community collection centers. And about 125,000 tons of yard waste were ground and beneficially reused. Resource recovery waste composition. And we talked about that 80% that could be recycled or composted. And we know that because we did a waste composition study in 2015 where we actually brought in the commercial, multifamily, and residential trucks and actually dug through the garbage and separated into these different components. Talk about your dirty jobs, right? So, so about 80% of that was compostable or recyclable. Moving into recycling. This pie chart shows how the tons were actually processed. 50% went to resource recovery, another 30 into the landfill, and 12% was yard waste, and only 8% was recycled through the system in 2018. Some of the system issues with respect to disposal and recycling is the residential recycling has not grown. In 2013, we saw a spike in recycling tonnage from about 30,000 to almost 61,000 tons in 2014 in response to our automated recycling collection system. And that has remained flat over the last 5 to 6 years. So we've done, despite our education outreach efforts, the recycling tons continue to be flat. The recycling market's down. We used to receive revenue for recycling recycled material. Now we're starting to have to pay to recycle that material. Recycling contamination. In Hillsborough County, we have about a 19% contamination rate in our curbside recycling program. State and nationally, it's about 30%. And recycling, it degrades the product. It makes it more difficult to process and more difficult to market. The customer base continues to grow. We set about 1.9% growth rate. The growth continues, the amount of garbage grows, but recycling stays flat, has been staying flat. We talked, resource recovery is at design capacity, so that as new homes come in, that waste is diverted to the landfill. The increased tons at the landfill, only 15 years of constructed design capacity currently exist at the current disposal rate at Southeast Landfill. So as you can see, currently we're very heavy on the lower end of that waste hierarchy in disposal, and only 23 being recycled throughout the county. We'd like to rebalance that and divert more from the landfill into resource recovery through recycling efforts. We'll move into the solid waste budget, the fun part. Okay, we'll go over the revenue and expenses. First, we'll start with the revenue. The majority of the revenue, over 58%, it comes in through our residential assessments. That's for disposal assessments and our collection assessments. The additional 24% comes in as tipping fees. That's the commercial trucks, the municipal trucks that go over the scales at our transfer stations, our landfill, and our resource recovery facility. And then another 12% is through electric sales. And then another 6% is from the sale of our ferrous and non-ferrous and recyclable goods, in addition to interest income. Moving into expenses, the total system expenses in 2018 were about $110 million. Majority of that were contractual services. Our collection contracts account for about 26%. The resource recovery operation of the resource recovery facility, another 24%. Landfill, 5%, and then other contractual, which is our yard waste facilities and our engineering contracts, was another 12%. That's about 67% of the total overall budget is contractual, all with contracts that escalate the price on an annual basis. Another 13% is debt service. That's the bonds for the resource recovery facility. And another 3% is for closure costs. So as that landfill is filled up, we have to put away money to close that landfill and to maintain that landfill after closure for 30 years. This chart just shows the history of the revenue and expenses. And as you can see, in 2019, the operating or the overall solid waste budget exceeds the revenue in 2019. Moving into the solid waste rates. In 1997, under the Ordinance 96-33, the non-ad valorem solid waste collection and disposal assessments were added to the county tax bill. And this is an actual copy of a tax bill and how our residents will receive that assessment as 2 separate charges for solid waste disposal and 1 for solid waste collection. And that's done on an annual basis. I know many counties and municipalities are on monthly. This is on an annual basis. What do those current rates cover? On the collection assessment, that actually covers the collection of those 3 trucks to come by on that weekly basis, in addition to the carts. That covers the recycling cart, in addition to covers the cost of the garbage cart. On the disposal end, that disposal assessment covers this resource recovery facility, operation and maintenance of the transfer and yard waste facilities, household hazardous waste and community collection centers, and the capital improvement projects. And some of the capital improvement projects that are currently in the budget are planning for the landfill expansion. There's geotechnical work that needs to be done prior to even permitting or construction of that landfill, and that's a 7 to 8 year process, so that's something that that we need to start now. Renovation of the Northwest Transfer Station campus, that's a customer service improvement. Resource recovery warehouse, that's an operational improvement. And landfill leachate improvements, that's required by DEP regulations. So as you can see, none of these really add additional disposal capacity at this time. The 2020 solid waste proposed rates, the collection assessment is proposed to be unchanged at 131.43, and that's been consistent since 2013. The disposal assessment is 102.89 at the proposed rate, and for the total solid waste assessment at 234.32. And as you can see, the chart below shows the history of the solid waste assessments. We've seen from 2013 to 2017, that's total solid waste assessment has been flat. We were able to maintain those rates for almost 5 years without any increase, despite contractual escalations. And this year in 2020, we're proposing a total solid waste assessment rate of 234.32. That's an increase of almost 2.3% of the increase in the total assessment. How do the rates compare? We continue to be one of the lowest in the Bay Area. The proposed rate adjustments annually, there's a rate hearing is required to adopt the solid waste rates. So on May 1st, we'll come to you to request to set a public hearing to adopt the solid waste rates. Once that date is approved, we'll advertise that date and the proposed rates in the Tampa Bay Times. In addition, we'll notify all residential customers via first-class mail. And then on the date that is proposed would be July 15th. At that time, we'll have a public hearing and adopt the solid waste rates. Some of the challenges and innovations on the system, we'd like to go through those, but first I'd like to tell you some of the innovative projects underway currently. We have a biosolids composting partnership with our Public Utilities Department at our Southeast landfill. In addition, we're looking at landfill gas to energy at our Southeast County landfill. And we're also working on an ash reuse pilot with the University of Florida, where we take that ash from the resource recovery facility and beneficially use it in roadways and concrete. We're also exploring options for a solar farm at the Taylor Road landfill. We've undertaken a Reduce Your Use Tampa Bay campaign with Keep Tampa Bay Beautiful, and you'll see some of the material in front of you. Some of that material we give out to our customers that sign a pledge to reduce their use of single-use plastic. So you'll see a reusable straw and some bamboo utensils. In addition, we have a regional recycling contamination outreach campaign with City of Tampa, St. Pete, and Pinellas County, where we try to get rid of some of the contamination in that recycling stream, which many of the other counties are having problems with also. You also see in front of you what we call our recycling do's and don'ts. This is published on an annual basis, usually in the fall, in the Tampa Bay Times. It talks about the recycling do's and don'ts and about the services the solid waste provides. This is also provided annually to many of the schools in the Hillsborough County area. So anything you need to know about solid waste is in here. Some of the collection challenges and opportunities. Residential collection service issues, that contract does expire in 2020, and we have had some service issues just recently. So in order to address those challenges, we could rebid the collection contract and start a new contract in October of 2020. That is about an 18-month process to rebid those contracts. And in those contracts, we could explore options for once-a-week garbage collection to hold down rates. We could also look at volume-based rates, or also known as pay-as-you-throw or save-as-you-recycle. And we could look up backup service. So in the event one of the franchise collectors fails to provide adequate service, we'd have a backup contractor that could come in and take those services over. Also, to improve customer service, solid waste staff could be the first point of contact for our residential, for service request issues. Currently, it's the franchise collectors. We could also improve convenience for our Hillsborough County customers by adding more community collection centers and more household hazardous waste facilities. To address the challenges in the recycling and disposal end, we talked about the limited disposal capacity. We are at capacity at the resource recovery facility and approaching capacity, designed and permitted capacity at the Southeast landfill. In order to address those, we could construct what we call a mixed waste processing facility that takes out all those recyclables before they hit the disposal facilities and make room for more room at the resource recovery facility and diverting more from the landfill. We could expand the resource recovery facility or locate a new facility. We could also develop alternatives for beneficial reuse of combined ash from the resource recovery facility. About 30% of what goes into the landfill is that ash from the resource recovery facility. If we're able to beneficially reuse that, that further extends the life of the landfill. In regards to the recycling and processing contract, that contract is with Waste Connections currently. That contract expires in September of 2020. So we could rebid that recycling contract. That is also another 12 to 18-month process. We could also take those recyclables and process those at that mixed waste processing facility we talked about. We could also increase education and outreach. That could increase tonnage, our recycling and diversion rate. We could develop environmental preferable purchasing guidelines, or we could implement universal and commercial multifamily recycling. Other opportunities for sustainability, we could further evaluate the expansion of the self-service energy grid to other county facilities. And that figure that we showed earlier, there are several other county facilities surrounding that grid that the grid could be extended to. We could also develop an innovative environmental park at a resource recovery facility or at our landfill and power that up through our landfill gas to energy or our waste to energy facilities. We could also evaluate beneficial reuse options for old closed landfills. We do have 2 old closed landfills that we own, one off 579 in Seffner, which is our Taylor Road, Hillsborough Heights landfill, and we have one in North County off Linebaugh at our Northwest transfer station. So in closing, we'll be coming to you May 1st to request to set a public hearing for the solid waste rates. And want to emphasize that we're at a critical time in the system and look forward to working with you to address these challenges in an innovative manner in order to achieve the vision of a sustainable solid waste system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Byer. We have some commissioners in the queue. Commissioner White, you recognize.
Thank you. What caught my attention is that on slides 34 and 35, you mention a rebidding process for solid waste and recycling. And in both cases, that's about a 12 to 18-month process?
More toward an 18-month process, yes.
Okay, so we would need to get started like now, if we're going to do it. So, commissioners, and particularly for the newer commissioners, you know, I'll just say that you'll quickly find out that the collection logistics for solid waste is a big deal, particularly on the constituent services front. Yeah, it really is a major issue. And I don't know whether or not some of the other issues that I have on my mind would come into play in this bidding process, but I think about things like converting solid waste to energy, like we've talked about, the market for recyclables that you mentioned with you know, China, you know, not essentially not taking on U.S. recyclables at this point. And these are major issues. So given these important issues, if we're going to go out to bid, I think that the board should weigh in on the RFP document. So if we're going to go out to bid, I'd like to direct staff to bring the RFP document to the board for a vote on the regular agenda. I think it'll warrant some discussion and a vote. So.
Commissioner White, before you go there, I think 2 of us were here the last time this happened, and it was a tedious process, and they said 18 months is probably, yeah, close to 18 months, but before we start stipulating RFPs and those type of things, I think we need to do that at another meeting. We can't take a vote here at a workshop.
I certainly think we can ask staff, though, as to bring.
We did what you are asking last time. We reviewed the RFP.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
So we already did that, so that's kind of part of the
That's part of the
deal.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah, they brought back the RFP.
I'd certainly like to review this one if we're gonna go out to bid, you know,
Well,
because
we haven't-
things could be certainly proposed.
We haven't made
to
that
be
decision
different.
if we're going out to bid. That's the issue.
Right, right. So my statement said, if we're going to go out to bid, that staff should bring the RFP document to the board for consideration.
Is that going to be on the next agenda? We,
Just May 1st.
The next regular agenda?
yes. The
It
discussion.
could, yeah, we could. We just wanted to get feedback today on which direction you wanted to go, but we could bring something back
The,
preliminarily.
Because right now, we're about 17 months out. I figured, am I figuring right?
Yeah, about 18 months.
17 months. So if we're gonna look at having a discussion to go out to bid, it needs to be on the next agenda
We could do
as a
that.
discussion item.
Discussion item.
Yeah.
okay. Commissioner Merman, I heard you in the background mention May 1st. I think that pertains to setting the rates. Just-
May
just
1st will
setting
request
the public,
the public.
the
to set a
public hearing for the rates. Yeah,
Yes.
this would pertain more to the concept of going out to bid. So we can have a discussion at the next meeting then?
It's on the
Okay.
agenda for next meeting.
Great.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was quite enlightening. And I am somewhat familiar with the resource recovery process, which I found the city of Tampa does, and Willebrator was the contractor that basically ran the burn plant,
Yes.
which I found really fascinating. It was pretty cool. I assume, do we contract that as well out?
We
they
do. The
that
company
for
that
us?
runs our facility is Covanta.
Is Covanta,
Yes.
okay, all right. And what I'm curious about is the cost comparison to the long-term maintenance of landfill versus the maintenance of a, recycle, the reuse plant,
Yeah.
burn plant for all practical purposes. They also creates energy.
Yes.
And creates ash, because we've got 22, according to your slide 19, you've got 22% of the landfill that's other, that obviously is maybe possibly potentially available for the burn to generate energy
Yes.
and ash. But we're, if I understood you correctly, we're at capacity? Is
We're
that-
at capacity, yes.
Okay. What does it cost for us to utilize land cost and land maintenance and landfill requirements that meet leaching and everything else that goes along with landfill as compared to building another burn plant? Because that would seem like a better use of resources at this point, but I'm maybe not having the whole picture, so.
Yes. That's something we'll have to bring those costs back to you. I mean, we have current costs, it's about 35 to, I'll let John answer that question.
Thank you. John Lyons, Infrastructure Services. Commissioners, I think we can broadly characterize that is that if we had a landfilling operation only, our tipping fees would be lower. As an example, I think in Polk County, it's less than $40 a ton, and I would suspect that that includes that they're building funds for landfill closure and long-term care of that facility at that rate. Our tipping fee, I believe, is somewhere around $70 a ton, $68, $69 a ton. That includes debt service and all the things associated with the total disposal side of the system. So I think in general, we could say that an incineration process is going to cost more money, but it has, from a sustainability piece, that it's a longer-term answer to doing things. It reduces that waste, it gives opportunity, it generates electricity, it has beneficial as opposed to just occupying property.
Well, and that's why, we had a long conversation this morning about land use. And given that we're going to have the need to make sure we protect areas that are available for either businesses or residences or open spaces or environmental areas, we're going to have a limitation of the amount of land we have available for landfill, which feels like a total waste of land use. It's not, I get that, but because there's going to be some things we can't recycle or some things we can't burn. But the long-term ROI on investing in another burn facility that generates energy that can actually facilitate the powering of buildings in a reasonably close area would, even in spite of the fact that up front it might be more expensive, but long-term it may be a better solution. I love the idea of using solar on the buildings. That's very cool. They're big flat tops, and they could also supplement that energy on all of our county buildings if we were able to create that kind of grid. But clearly, if we could come up with a great solution for the ash, whether it be road product or, you know, whatever you could use ash for, it would appear as though there's an opportunity to really help offset the cost of our you know, our solid waste collection. So, but those are the first things that kind of stuck out at me. Even though it might be more expensive to build another plant, it would appear environmentally it would be better to do. That was my only concern, is on the burn process, are we measuring the smoke output? Do we have the appropriate environmental protections to keep pollution from our air quality? That might be something we have to consider as well. But just general questions, since I'm new to this game. So thank you very much for your presentation. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. I also thought the presentation was very good and enlightening, and I liked getting all the information. A couple of things, this is really basic. Is trash in the county collected once a week?
Trash in the county is collected twice a week.
That's what I
Yard waste
thought.
once a week and recycling once a week.
That's what I thought. Okay. So, and one thing you talked about is volume-based rates, and I just wondered, I mean, there might be, just in terms of when we think about this contract, people who are okay with once-a-week pickup, which might help, you know, and maybe a discounted rate for that, or I don't know how. It seems like it might be complicated, or maybe not with technology or something about volume-based rates, but to me that's a interesting concept, and I don't know if it's working in other places or what is being done with that.
Typically, the volume-based rates or pay-as-you-throw is done through a cart base, so you pay more for a 95-gallon cart, be it once a week or twice a week. The whole county would be either once a week or twice a week, and then the volume base would be based on the size of the cart. So a 95-gallon, you pay more, 65-gallon, you pay less, and 35 would even pay even less.
So when you say the whole county would be, so you couldn't have variable
Right.
routes where some houses would have, or some places would
It's
have once a
typically
week?
not done that way, yes.
Because I've always thought that, I mean, I didn't even know that I had garbage pickup twice a week, honestly. I just found that out after many years. And
Don't you live in the city limits?
yeah, and I did not know. I didn't understand that it was. Yeah, I was only putting it out on Mondays, and when there was a holiday, I was waiting 2 weeks. But I don't have. People were generating more recyclables where I am, or at least that was seeming to be the greater need. And I understand that the market has changed significantly since last year when China closed its doors, and I guess other places in Southeast Asia, and it caused a disruption, huge, massive disruption, I guess, in the way we have been doing in this country our waste. And I don't know how that's affected Hillsborough County, but certainly we want to look to the future. I know you had the recycle and the reuse and the 3 R's.
Yeah.
And I always think about, but this is outside of our what we can do, but the redesign. And I really would like to see us be taking a greater role with some of our resources, at least in really pushing voluntarily in what ways we can, how we can really start to reduce our volume of garbage, trash, whatever. The other is, while I appreciate that, and yes, to all the solar, I think we should be doing everything we can to use those places. I was surprised that there's only a 30-year monitoring on the landfills. I guess by law, because I can totally imagine that they could deteriorate after 30 years, and that could be a problem for the future. I was amazed that 30% of ash is what fills our landfills, 30% of ash from the resource recovery plant. I know, I think we need to be aware that resource recovery plants, as far as I know at this time, are one of the greatest generators of greenhouse gases, which is also, and the ash is, as I understand, pretty toxic and not desirable. So I see the project at the University of Florida using it in roads, but you know, again, I'm just thinking through kind of the big picture here about what we do in the future to be the most sustainable and use our and do the best we can at having a sustainable garbage solid waste program. So those are just all concerns I have. Then in terms of really getting down to the nitty-gritty with the contracts as we move forward, it seems to me that our contracts, and I don't really understand the economics involved in the contracts, but that they fail to incentivize household residential pickup as opposed to commercial pickup and commercial contracts. So I'm not sure how that gets changed. And there might be some rethinking to be done in how that works. And I'd like to see us do that rethinking and hear some options for how we combine the commercial and residential to incentivize residential pickup. And it may be something that will be presented, but I just want to share that I'd like to see that happen so that we don't have this constant problem of the residential pickup in some places. And I guess there's very much difference between the 5 districts, and the district that's the most dense and easiest to pick up is the one that's done well. And anyway, so those are just some basic thoughts I have as you go forward in some concerns. Yes.
Commissioner Merwin, you recognize.
Thank you, and I'll keep this brief. Thank you, Kim.
you're
Always, you do such a good job. I have to applaud her for what she's doing in the customer service department, because it's an impossible task, but you are really hitting the achievement mark in doing such a great job. I know you communicate with my office frequently.
Yes.
Okay, so kind of the elephant in the room, we're talking about garbage. Why do you think there's such a problem with garbage collection today? And why we really, because I am for rebidding. I think 7 years is probably long enough for a government contract for any one entity, but, and generally they've done well until recently. And then all of a sudden we have this problem. Is it growth, or what is the real issue?
Yes, we have done very well up until just recently. Republic has had some challenges in their districts 3, and one of they came to us about a year ago and told us they were not going to be eligible for the contract renewal because they weren't going to transition to CNG. They couldn't afford to at the rates they were currently charging. So I think that may have played a role in the District 3 issues.
And with the growth, you mean they have to, there's more pickups?
Yes. Well,
So they got to pick up more, and they're getting a lot less money, and, you know, the economics aren't there. Is that right?
Yes, and District 5 also has seen a huge growth spurt. In District 5, that's Waste Connections. So they're seeing some issues there due to the growth in the community in that area.
Okay. Well, if we do rebid, I do think there should be kind of in the scoring, a performance, and because some have performed very well, there should be some scoring indicator that would indicate if somebody is rebidding that has had one of these contracts, that there might be an incentive. I'm just making that as a suggestion to include that because I think it's appropriate. The other thing, just for the commissioners, one thing we did talk about frequently, and Commissioner Miller and I were the only ones here today that were in the last, we felt strongly about going to once-a-week collection. We don't know if you remember that, Commissioner Miller, and we actually wanted to transition to once-a-week collection. Do you remember this? After a couple years, but I don't think we ever did it. And we really have to take a look at that. And see, I mean, if it's a situation where somebody's gonna have too much garbage, maybe in the rural areas, maybe they get 2 cans. Or, yeah, we kind of work through this with the localities. I don't want to tell somebody they can't have garbage pickup, twice a week, but if we can accommodate it, make it easier for us that have to pay these people to pick up the garbage, it might help.
Yeah, the reason we didn't go to 1 pickup last time is because there were so many changes that were going to automated pickup, and we didn't want to layer yet another thing on top of customers to have to
Right.
contend with. So the discussion led to let's just take care of
Keep it the
automated
same.
pickup first and make sure everyone's on board, and then we can talk about single pickup. So single pickup doesn't necessarily mean that you get better service.
No,
It means
no.
that the cost will be less.
Right.
And so, just saying that may not solve the problem. There are other ways potentially to solve the problem, but we can certainly look at once a week.
Yeah,
pickup.
I'd like to look at a lot of different options like that, so that we don't just continue to do business or, adopt what we've been doing in the past. That if there's something out there that we're not thinking of, that maybe another county's doing or something, and I guess I'd like to see what other counties are doing about who are our size in the garbage collection arena, to see if there's some suggestions out there that we could pick up.
Before we go to second round of questions, let me ask something. I know everybody don't look at me like I'm crazy, okay? But are there any counties that's in Florida that's comparable to our size, or any counties in the southeast that owns their own solid waste? They don't contract it out, they own it themselves?
You mean they operate collections themselves? Miami-Dade is the only one I can think of that size. Lee, no. Sarasota, no. Miami-Dade, and is the only one I can think of.
No,
off the
it
top of
wasn't.
my head.
Commissioner Merman says where they put the dead bodies, but. But Miami-Dade does that?
Yes.
Does their own? Okay. What would a cost like that be to us?
Do you remember the cost estimate we put together? I'm sorry, I don't have it off the top of my head.
We did a back of napkin kind of estimate on it. It would probably require probably $60–80 million in capital investment in a fleet. Obviously, a bunch more employees. We'd have to have some facilities to park these trucks at, and it'd be a pretty significant investment and ramp-up process. And I believe there's some statutory process. I know there's been some bills going through the legislature this year that are putting a different spin on the notice process the community has to do before we can unprivatize the collection side of the system. But it'd be a pretty significant capital investment to do that. Probably would, we estimate, probably over a couple hundred employees to do that across the system.
And how much are our contracts now?
They're about 60-some million annually? No,
It's on slide,
yeah, some more in the slides.
right here.
Wrong way.
There you go.
26 million a year right now.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Thank you. I noticed in our conversation about the RFP that the areas that we are finding difficulty are in Zone 3 and 5, which have been areas that have grown significantly over the last few years. Those zones have grown significantly. So within our RFP, we need to have some either capacity areas, capacity questions, or triggers that would suggest that when we have already zoned or already permitted, but the buildings aren't there, or the homes aren't there, or but they will be during that, or anticipate that they will be during that contract period, we need to be aware that that's going to cause a problem for any provider of our services or anyone that contracts with it. Because if they are suddenly have, you know, a doubling of that service area to provide the same level of services, it's going to be problematic, which may have been part of what we have experienced more recently. But as it pertains to the volume, you know, the once-a-week pickup, from previous experience and conversations about things like this, there was 2 issues that were affected. One, I don't know whether or not we have a comparison on the volume comparison, like per day volume. For example, if they're picked up at the same location twice a week, is there less in the beginning of the week than there is at the end of the week for that same location? Because if we were able to do that, then the other question is, if we went to one, how many transfers do you need to take to get back to either the recycle system or the transfer station? So I know it's a combination of not only how many pickups you do or the volume pickup, but if the trucks get very, very full fast, they end up having to come off the route and go back to wherever they're picking up.
Right.
So I don't know if that comparison has been made when we're looking at, possibly looking at once a week pickup. So there's, I'd suggest that some weeks I don't need to have pickup at all. And then other weeks, you know, there's all kinds of stuff that needs to be thrown away. So, and it does impact our large families. Kids make a lot of trash. They just do. And not all of it's recyclable. So I'm just curious, in looking at our growth, when we go to an RFP, we'll need to take into consider what areas do we have already permitted for growth and housing that's just not there yet. But more importantly, if we do choose to change the way we deliver services, where those transfer stops are, where those transfer stations are, where the truck can empty out to come back is going to be, where that placement is going to be important across the county.
Right. We can
Correct?
evaluate-
I mean,
Yes,
is
you're
that right?
correct. And we can evaluate that. We know what the set-out rate is in certain areas. We just need to look at the volume now based on the set-out rates. And we typically see the highest set-out rates is the same day that they have recycling. So that's usually the highest participation rate. But we can look at the waste generation too, prior to an RFP or a bid.
How good are our citizens at reducing the contamination of our recycled materials? I mean, is it just normal
It's just
EMS,
normal. I mean,
or is it good?
We're about 19%, I mean, which is about average for a community our size. Nationwide, it's about 30%, so we do a pretty good job. I think what we really have a problem with is what we call wish cycling, where people think it could be recycled at their curbside, and so they put it in their cart. It can be recycled somewhere, but just not in the curbside program. And that's some of the challenges we have with the outreach efforts, is letting people know, yeah, we appreciate you trying, but it really doesn't go in this cart.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you very much for your help.
Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Just a couple of quick questions, thank you. I recall from the outside looking in to the discussions about going to once a week pickup back when that was being renegotiated, that it seemed like there was a lot of citizen backlash to that citizens really were not like, they didn't want to go to once a week. They did not appreciate the efficiency of it at all. And is that the case?
There was a significant outreach program. As Mike said, we were converting to the automated pickups. So there was an educational program where we took carts out all the time, looked at different size carts, and let people select which cart size would be most preferable. As part of that, there was that discussion about once or twice a week. And I think back then the resounding response is twice a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the way I remember it. And the other question is, did I hear in your presentation that, and I've been hearing this from like rumors, but of citizens, is some of our recycling is being diverted to the landfill? Is that the polluted, contaminated, recycling?
Yeah, that's only the contaminated portion of the recycling stream, which is about 19% is diverted to the landfill.
Okay, so, but there's, it's not that because China, the market has shrunk, we're not able to handle the volume, and so we're diverting some to the landfill?
No, no, and it's not to the landfill, I'm sorry, that's to resource, mostly to resource recovery. So any of the
Okay.
residuals would go to the resource recovery facility.
Thank you very
So-
much. That's it.
Commissioner White, you recognize?
Well, you'll be proud to know that my personal recyclables are spick and span. In fact, I've often wondered, you know, with the water it takes to get my spaghetti sauce jar ready to recycle, like what's the net environmental benefit?
We'll have
But
to do a site inspection.
yeah, look, I don't know whether or not the sentiment it has potentially changed over time, but I know that I have found with the gigantic green bin, okay, and I'm one of those large families. Until my oldest daughter went off to college last year, we were a family of 5, and I still find, I'm on a Wednesday, Saturday schedule. I find that I rarely put my can out on Saturday. So I'm a de facto once a week person. So, you know, that's something to consider as we think about this RFP. But, you know, I've had something on my mind for quite some time, and it just dawned on me that this is the setting to bring it up. How difficult would it be to have a hybrid model where you have the automated pickup like we do now, but to mix in a few manual pickups, maybe one per quarter or twice a year? Because I do find that around Christmas time, it's a challenge because you're throwing away, you know, wrapping paper and boxes and turkey carcasses and stuff like that. So you do have a styrofoam, you have more of a demand. And then also when we do, you know, spring cleaning on occasion, I find that we fill the can up pretty quickly. So I've often wondered if we could mix in, you know, a couple of manual pickups per year, maybe one around the holiday season, and you pick the second one. And, you know, people know, hey, if I want to do my spring cleaning and have a bunch of trash picked up curbside, I should do it around this date. Is that too complex, or is that something we could explore? Or?
No, we can explore it. It's probably a cost issue. I mean,
Okay.
at some point,
Yeah.
you know, if they're geared up to do automated and they have to put manual on the road, it's just an extra cost, but,
Yeah.
you know.
I'd like to explore it, if for any other reason, just to get an idea of what the price tag would be.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, sure.
Okay.
Yep. This would be the time to
Yeah.
put all that in there and see what we get.
Okay.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize?
Just a couple of things. I think Commissioner White makes a good point. We do have that in the city, and we just recently, people had a lot of stuff on their curb. And I think it's really valuable because it really stops maybe trash from being dumped in places. And, you know, I just think it's a really critical thing. I do know, too, that there was a lot of pushback, even though I wasn't, you know, just as a member of the public, hearing about the pushback about the once a week back when the other contract was decided. But as you said, it was mixed with this automation. And I think a lot of the issue was that people, first of all, our garbage containers, for the most part, that people had individually purchased were smaller. Second, they weren't tight enough or proof from animals and smell and whatever else. And so there were lots of people complaining about that. But I think with the new containers, that there would be much less pushback about this as an issue, and maybe especially if we combined it with something like a once a year, maybe a twice a year special collection like that. I think that's a really great suggestion. Also, did you say, I'm just going back thinking through I think you said that both the resource recovery and the landfill was near capacity, but one way that we could get better capacity would be to try to gear up our recycling?
Yes,
Is that-
we talked about a mixed waste processing facility where the waste goes into a facility before it goes into the resource recovery facility and extracts the metals and the recycling products before it hits the resource recovery facility or even the landfill.
So I'd be very supportive of that option. And the other is, Commissioner Miller, when you had talked about privatizing, is it the city of Tampa? Don't they have like 3 districts or privatizing, I'm sorry, making public a private entity? Does the city of Tampa have like 3 districts and one of them are done in a public way and the other 2 are privatized? Do we know?
I know that residentially it's done through the city, and there are some levels of the commercial that they have contracted out.
Okay, because I don't know if that might be an option for Gearing or looking at that like a district, or at least initially if we wanted to test that out or look at doing that. So those are just the thoughts I had about the comments that were made.
Gonna pass the tax? Commissioner Merman, you recognize.
Thank you, and just 2 quick things. I did fail to mention, I am for increasing the number of zones. I think that with our growth, that's really critical. I know Commissioner Overman touched on it, and the city does, it's a cleanup, and they really advertise it. They do it twice a year. And I'll tell you, people put mattresses, old barbecue grills, it's great.
Dead people.
Dead bodies.
Whatever. No, it's almost like a neighborhood relations program. It's not so much, I do think they probably privatize that because I don't see the blue trucks coming through when they do that. So it's a good program, but it's probably expensive. Check it out.
Yep.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Actually, the really cool thing about, it's called Clean Sweep, and it goes through the city. They advertise in their billing what weeks and what zones are done. So, and they also give you a very nice long list of things that you can put in there and then things you can't. Normally it lasts for about a week. They give you a day you have to drop it by to make sure it's there. The challenges they've experienced is if it all gets out there on Monday, but they don't pick up till Thursday, everybody in their neighborhood is now piling on the pile that you have in front of your place, including things that you cannot throw away. And so, and if they miss you, it becomes a nightmare. But the trucks that they use are different. You know, I mean, they literally use a gigantic dump truck with a big claw on it to pick up everything, and then it gets sorted, I guess, at the recycle facility. But it is a good service. People do appreciate it, especially our seniors and families that might not have access to a trailer to take it down to McKay Bay. It helps families actually not have a lot of garbage around their property, so it actually assists in reducing code enforcement problems and zoning, issues, neighbor issues, when they have an opportunity to have someone pick it up when they don't have the ability to do it themselves. But it is once a year. It's broken up into like little neighborhoods, and they let you know, and they communicate it to the neighborhood associations. They make sure they're aware of it and get that information out so that people can utilize the service. And it really does come invaluable in our communities, because I know when it maybe 9 months have gone by, and it's been a long time, you start seeing, as Commissioner Merman mentioned, mattresses being dumped in neighborhoods because it's been almost 9 months since they came through the last time. But it is problematic, but it does actually offer a really nice way of addressing it. But it is different equipment.
Right.
It's definitely a different way of picking up. And so I think if we look into doing something like that, I think there could be a great benefit that we don't really think about, like not having as many code enforcement problems. But we do need to plan very carefully in small areas because those trucks fill up really fast.
Right.
Really, really fast. Thank you.
We can definitely get
Next steps.
Commissioner, just one quick thing, if I might. There was a number of questions that related to the recycling piece. On slide 16, Kim, if you could go to that, I think that where she had, right before the fulcrum with the two balancing pieces, that's our challenge right now, is because what we're trying to do is avoid the landfill, and the resource recovery piece, we're saying that facility is now at capacity, but if you look at the numbers, some 82% of what's going into resource recovery is actually recyclable. So if you get that out, it frees up capacity at the resource recovery facility. So that's the balance that we're trying to strike. We're trying to ensure that we have somebody on board who can help us figure that out, because recycling isn't just a Hillsborough County problem. It's a global issue, as a number of you have mentioned. People want to recycle, they just don't know what to put in it. I don't know if we gave them the packages. Kim, did we give the commissioners the packages? You should have the packages that have the list of things you can and cannot recycle, and the pizza box that could go in one time can't go in anymore. So it just is becoming more and more challenging, but it really is that target area for us to loosen up capacity in the resource recovery plant. So as the next step, I heard a request to bring back the components of the contract rebid. What we would offer, given that we're 2 weeks away, is that we bring it back in a term sheet, or a way that we describe what the options are for you to consider. So it would be everything from once a week to some of the other options that you identified, up to and including couple times a year, a special pickup or such. So we would bring that back to you. In addition to that, though, and to the bid piece, we would bring back then on May 1st a request to set a public hearing on the rate increase. So this rate increase would represent just continued service as it is. If we were to make any kind of major changes or overhauls, I know, just read that Pasco County actually added a recycling assessment on their bill. If we wanted to make those kinds of changes, those would have to show up. Then we would have to think about those in tandem with the contracts, and probably a year or two away from moving away from kind of the system that we've set into place.
Okay. I just
So,
have
Mr.
one
Merwin,
more
you
thing.
recognize.
Thank you. I'll make this quick. And could you include like the whole communications piece? I don't think Liana's shop was up and running, fully functional when we did this last rebid and all that. So engaging the neighborhood relations, I mean, that whole shop has really got more manpower and expertise in it. And I think that that would be very beneficial for us to know that we're going to do extensive public outreach. Thank you.
Ms. Byers, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lyons, thank you. Mr. Merrill, Ms. Garces, we adjourn.